I froze the second I saw her, the soft click of the apartment door behind me still echoing in the empty hallway. She was standing by the window, one hand resting lightly on the sill, the late afternoon sun catching strands of her hair and turning them gold. I wanted to step closer, but the air between us felt charged, like a wire strung taut, humming just beneath my skin. "Close the door," she said, her voice low, deliberate, and something in it unraveled me a little. Not with fear. Not exactly. It was the way her eyes lingered on mine, unblinking, measuring, teasing, that made the words electric. I smiled, more a reflex than wit. "Only if you promise not to scream too loud," I replied, heart picking up pace even as I tried to make it sound like a joke. Her lips twitched, just the faintest curve, but her gaze sharpened. She leaned a fraction closer, and I noticed the warmth radiating from her, the subtle scent of jasmine that clung to her jacket. It was intoxicating, the kind of thing that shouldn't feel this easy, or this dangerous. My hand itched to brush against hers, to close the tiny distance that remained. We didn't speak for a moment. The silence wasn't empty. It was full, thick with anticipation, with everything we both refused to say. Her fingers grazed the edge of the table as if she were counting seconds, and I could almost feel the pull of her attention, the way it sought me, tethered me, without permission. "You're staring," she said finally, almost accusingly. But there was no anger there, just a quiet, intimate acknowledgement that we were both caught off guard by the same thing, the ease of being in this charged bubble together. "I wasn't," I mumbled, though my eyes refused to lie. I watched her inhale, slow and deliberate, and felt the pull of the unspoken. Every subtle gesture, her hair brushing her shoulder, the slight shift of her weight, the way her lips parted minutely, told me more than any words could. She hummed, tilting her head, letting her eyes wander just a second too long over my shoulder before returning. That fleeting glance, that pause, made my chest tighten. I realized I could count the beats of my own pulse and still hear hers, echoing, mirrored in the space between us. I stepped closer. She didn't step back. That was the quiet surrender that undid me, the silent permission that made the air almost unbearable. My hand brushed hers on accident, or maybe it was deliberate, I couldn't tell anymore, and the jolt of contact went straight to my core. She didn't pull away. Instead, her eyes softened, and for a heartbeat, the world shrank until it was just us, the warmth of her presence, the faint scent of jasmine, the subtle tremble in her fingers as they lingered near mine. "Are you always this forward?" she whispered, voice low enough that I felt it against my own skin rather than just in my ears. "Not usually," I admitted, voice catching. "But I can't seem to stop right now." A tiny smile, almost secretive, played across her lips, and she tilted her head toward the slightly ajar door. My stomach dropped. That look, equal parts challenge and invitation, pulled me forward. The moment hung on a knife's edge, suspended between restraint and surrender. Then, as if the universe couldn't resist the tension any longer, the hallway light flicked on outside. Shadows stretched across the room. Her gaze snapped to the door, mine followed hers, and suddenly, the bubble of closeness shattered, but the heat, the anticipation, lingered like smoke. She caught my gaze again, quick, sharp, and unyielding. That look, it promised something I wasn't sure I was ready for, but I couldn't turn away. The hallway light outside faded again, leaving us in the half-shadow of the apartment. She crossed to the counter, fingering a glass of water, but I noticed every small movement, the gentle arch of her neck, the way her fingers lingered on the rim, as if reluctant to let go. "I didn't expect you today," she said, voice careful, measured. But there was a softness under it, a trace of something unspoken. I shrugged, though my chest was tight. "Neither did I," I admitted, letting my gaze drift to her hands, to the slight tremor in her wrist. She caught me staring and looked away quickly, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. I knew some of her story, just enough to make my pulse quicken. Widowed young, a string of complicated relationships, an independence she guarded fiercely, but also a loneliness that she didn't broadcast. I saw it in the small hesitations, the way she sometimes lingered by the door as if weighing whether to let someone in. She moved closer to me as I reached for the coffee mug, and our fingers brushed. The contact was brief, almost accidental, but it left a faint warmth that neither of us could ignore. I could feel her presence more than see it, the subtle scent of her perfume, the faint rustle of her clothes as she shifted, the brush of her hair against her shoulder. "You're very observant," she said, eyes catching mine across the counter. The words weren't a compliment exactly, more like an acknowledgement of how little we usually allowed ourselves to reveal. "I notice things," I replied softly, trying to keep my voice steady. "Things most people miss." Her gaze softened for a fraction of a second, then she stepped back, as if giving herself a line she couldn't cross. That pull and release dynamic was maddening. I wanted to reach for her, to close that distance she kept putting between us, but I hesitated, aware of the risks, the whispers, the judgments, the way our ages made the world seem watchful even when it wasn't. "You're careful," she said suddenly, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I like that about you, but it's frustrating too." I laughed, low and shaky. "Frustrating?" "Yes," she admitted, tilting her head, letting her breath brush against my ear as she spoke. The contact was subtle, fleeting, but it made the back of my neck prickle. "You want to step closer, but you hold yourself back. Always." I don't know what I should do," I whispered, and even as I said it, my hand itched to rest against hers. Her eyes softened again, and this time, she didn't step back. She let the moment linger, the quiet space between us filling with something unspoken, electric. Her fingers hovered near mine, a subtle promise that the barrier we both maintained could be crossed if we dared. For a heartbeat, the room was small enough to contain just us, her scent, her warmth, the soft hum of life around us that didn't touch this fragile bubble. I wanted to reach, to take the risk, to touch her hand, but even then, the tension wasn't desperation. It was a delicate acknowledgement that we were both aware of the stakes, and yet we couldn't help the pull that drew us together. She finally exhaled, long and slow, her eyes holding mine. And in that pause, just a brush of fingers near mine, I felt the invisible thread tighten, binding us closer, hinting at a bond that neither words nor hesitation could undo. The knock at the door came just as her fingers brushed mine again. My heart leapt in sudden panic. We froze, two statues caught mid-motion, the tension between us taut and fragile. She whispered, her voice caught somewhere between warning and amusement. I could feel her breath, warm and subtle, on my cheek. I held my hand just above hers, not daring to make contact, not yet. The knock repeated, more insistent this time. I glanced at her, eyes wide. Her lips parted slightly, a breathless question in the curve of her mouth. "Stay," she mouthed. One word. No sound. And I did. I crossed to the door and peeked through the peephole. Just a neighbor. Relief, sharp and sudden, flooded me, but it was mixed with something heavier, the ache of wanting her closer, the pull of this forbidden proximity. When I returned to her, she didn't move away. Instead, her hand hovered near mine, almost brushing, as if testing the boundary we'd drawn, and teasing me mercilessly. My pulse thundered in my ears. Every thought of caution, of logic, evaporated the instant our eyes met. "You shouldn't be here," she murmured, though her tone lacked conviction. I could see the tug-of-war in her expression, the desire hidden behind a veil of restraint. "And yet," I whispered, letting my gaze trace the line of her jaw, the curve of her neck. "Here I am." The air was heavy with everything we weren't saying. My hand twitched, yearning for contact, yet I dared not close the distance fully. She leaned closer, closer than necessary, until I could feel her breath against my lips. It was accidental. It was deliberate. It was everything I had been craving and everything I feared. A vibration from my phone broke the moment, harsh and intrusive. I flinched, fumbling for it, grateful for the interruption and bitter for the pause it forced. She stepped back, just slightly, though her eyes stayed locked on mine. "I should go," I muttered, though either of us wanted that. Her lips curved in the faintest smile. You don't have to. The words were small, but the weight behind them pressed against my chest. We moved closer again, drawn by the invisible thread, despite every reason to resist. I could feel her warmth, the soft brush of her sleeve against mine, the tension in her shoulders mirroring my own. Heartbeats collided. Glances held too long. Silences screamed in the spaces between words. I shouldn't, she began, voice trembling almost imperceptibly, a confession half swallowed. And I echoed, letting my voice trail off, caught in the gravity of what we both wanted but feared. In that suspended moment, inches apart, nothing needed to be said. Every flicker of movement, every shared breath, every near touch spoke louder than words ever could. The room shrank until it contained only us, only the heat of proximity, only the ache of restraint. And then, without speaking, without realizing who moved first, we were pressed closer than ever, drawn together by the invisible pull we had been resisting, and yet either of us crossed the line. Not yet. The apartment felt smaller now, every shadow stretching closer, every sound amplified. I could hear her breathing, uneven, almost fragile. My hands itched to close the distance, to steady her, to reach for the heat radiating from her in a way that was almost unbearable. I can't, she murmured, voice trembling, and for a heartbeat I thought she might step back. But she didn't. Instead, she leaned into me, the faint weight of her body anchoring itself against mine. The brush of her shoulder sent a jolt up my arm. Her eyes were wide, searching, and I saw it there, desire tangled with fear, longing wrapped in restraint. I reached out slowly, hesitating just long enough to feel the tension thrumming in the space between us. My fingers brushed a strand of hair from her face, catching it behind her ear, and she shivered, a tiny, involuntary response that tightened something deep inside me. I shouldn't want this, she whispered, barely audible. Her lips were so close I could feel the warmth radiating from them, the faint scent of her perfume wrapping around me like smoke. You're too young to what? I asked softly, letting my hand linger against her skin, letting my eyes search hers for permission and challenge all at once. She swallowed, biting her lip, and the vulnerability in that gesture broke something inside me. I can't. She tried again, but her body pressed closer, and suddenly all logic dissolved in the pull between us. I closed the final inch, letting my forehead brush hers, letting our breaths mingle. The heat of her nearness was dizzying, intoxicating. I could feel her heartbeat against my chest, erratic and fast, echoing my own. I've wanted this, I admitted, my voice low, rough with restraint. For longer than I can admit. Her eyes searched mine, a flicker of panic, then something else, relief, surrender, and dangerously, hope. She reached up, hand trembling slightly, and rested it against my chest. The touch was light, almost tentative, but it sent a current straight through me. I'm scared, she confessed, voice barely above a whisper. Of losing control. Of everything changing. And what if we don't? I countered softly, leaning closer, letting my lips hover near her ear. The warmth of my breath made her shiver. What if we just exist in this moment? Her eyes fluttered closed briefly, and I could feel her pulse, the tremor in her fingers, the weight of her leaning against me. Every second stretched out, taut, unbearable, electric. A sudden vibration from her phone jolted both of us, a harsh intrusion. She startled, stepping slightly away, and I cursed under my breath, not at the phone, but at the interruption. The tension remained raw, unbroken, and heavier than ever. The phone buzzed again, persistent this time, but she didn't move to check it. Instead, she let out a soft, bitter laugh, the kind that hides more than it reveals. It's him, she admitted finally, voice low. My stomach sank before I even asked who. I faltered, the word barely forming. Who? Someone from my past, she said, eyes flicking to the window, then back to me. Someone I thought I had moved on from. Her fingers brushed against the counter as if clinging to it for balance, the faint tremor unmistakable. I felt a pang of something sharp, jealousy? Fear, and my hand itched to reach for hers, though I held back. My pulse quickened. The air between us had already been taut, and this revelation pulled it even tighter, like a wire stretched too far. I didn't mean for it to resurface, she whispered, voice breaking slightly. But he saw me today. He knows I'm alone, She trailed off, biting her lip, the faintest shiver running down her spine as she leaned toward me, almost seeking refuge in my presence despite the danger. I stepped closer, unable to resist the pull. My fingers brushed against hers, light, tentative, but it sent a current that made her inhale sharply. You're not with him, I said low, almost a plea. She shook her head, eyes wide, lips parted slightly. No. I'm here. With you. But it's complicated. Her words trembled, as fragile as the quiver in her hands. I could feel her leaning just slightly, the warmth of her shoulder against mine, the faint scent of her perfume stronger somehow in the tension. Every inch of her presence called to me, defying caution, making restraint impossible. And you, she said, her voice dropping into a whisper that brushed my ear. You shouldn't want this. You shouldn't. She paused, letting the unsaid hang heavily. Her fingers twitched against mine, a subtle, involuntary tug toward me, as if daring me to ignore the world outside. I can't help it, I admitted, voice low, rough. I want you. Even if it's dangerous. Her breath hitched, eyes widening as the words sank in. She leaned in closer, not fully, but close enough that the heat between us pressed tangible, almost unbearable. The tension was no longer just desire, it was risk, uncertainty, and the thrill of forbidden proximity all at once. She stepped back slightly, trembling fingers brushing against mine again, too close to be casual. And if someone finds out? She asked, a soft edge of fear running through her voice. Then, I said, my hand hovering near hers, almost touching, we deal with it. Together. Her lips parted, a shiver passing through her at the sound of my words. The moment stretched, taut with everything unspoken, charged with the danger of being seen, the allure of giving in. Finally, after a pause thick enough to be felt in our bones, she exhaled slowly and looked up at me, eyes bright and raw. Then we risk it, she whispered. And just like that, the decision hung between us, an invisible bridge toward what neither of us could resist any longer. The room felt impossibly small, every shadow, every ray of light somehow focused on us. She stood there, barely breathing, and I could see it all in her eyes, fear, longing, hesitation, and something deeper, trust, fragile but real. I stepped closer, careful, deliberate, letting the warmth of my body brush hers without fully closing the distance. Every movement was measured, yet electric. Her fingers trembled at her sides, and I reached out slowly, fingertips brushing the back of her hand. She didn't pull away. She let me, and in that moment, the world outside, judgments, expectations, age, everything, faded to a dull hum. She started, voice low, shaky. I don't know if we should. You don't have to, I whispered, letting my hand linger near hers, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Her skin was warm under my touch, and I felt the subtle catch of her breath. But I want to. And I don't think I can wait any longer. Her eyes searched mine, darting briefly to the door, then back. The tension was unbearable, the delicate balance of desire and caution, of risk and surrender. And yet, despite the uncertainty, there was clarity in her gaze, a recognition that what we had between us couldn't be ignored. Slowly, deliberately, she stepped closer, the space between us collapsing into a fraction of an inch. I could feel her heartbeat against my chest, erratic, fast, and the faint brush of her shoulder sent a shiver through me. Our voices dropped to whispers, breaths mingling, every word a fragile thread tying us together. I've been trying to resist, she confessed, a faint quiver in her lips. But I can't. Not anymore. Neither can I admitted, letting my hand rest lightly on her waist, careful not to cross the final line until she was ready. She tilted her head slightly, lips parted, eyes fluttering closed for just a moment, an acknowledgement, an invitation. Time seemed to stretch, every second waited with anticipation. And then, with a tremulous laugh, soft and broken, she leaned into me, letting her head rest lightly against my chest. I wrapped my arms around her, careful, grounding, feeling the warmth of her body, the subtle tension melting into something profound. No words were needed. Everything unspoken, the fear, the longing, the hesitation, the desire, was held in the simple act of closeness. In that embrace, we both understood the risk, the stakes, the world outside, all irrelevant for now. She lifted her face to mine, eyes bright and raw, searching, asking without words. And I met her halfway, brushing my lips against hers in the gentlest, most deliberate kiss, a promise and a surrender all at once. We pulled back slightly, foreheads resting together, breaths mingling, the room still charged, still alive with tension, but now with clarity. We knew each other fully. The apartment was quiet now, the tension from earlier settled into something softer, warmer, almost like the air itself had changed. We sat together on the couch, shoulders touching, legs brushing lightly, the subtle contact grounding us after the storm of desire and hesitation. She rested her head against my shoulder, fingers intertwined with mine, thumb tracing circles over my hand. I could feel her heartbeat slow, her body relaxing against mine, and a small smile curved her lips, one I hadn't seen before, shy and content. I was scared, she admitted softly, eyes closed. Of doing something reckless. Of losing myself. I know, I whispered, pressing my forehead gently against hers. But we didn't lose ourselves. We just found each other. Her laugh was quiet, almost a sigh, but it held relief and something tender I'd been waiting to see. And you really aren't worried about what anyone else thinks? I shook my head. Not anymore. Not when this. I gestured vaguely to the space between us, to the warmth, the closeness, the unspoken understanding. Feels this right? She tilted her head, letting our lips meet in a soft, lingering kiss that wasn't about urgency anymore. It was about comfort, acknowledgement, and the quiet thrill of having survived the push and pull of temptation together. After a moment, we pulled back just enough to look at each other, smiles mirrored and shy, a gentle laugh escaping us both. No words could sum up the weight of what we'd navigated, but our hands remained locked, a simple testament to trust and connection. I never thought. She murmured, voice trailing off. I never thought I'd feel this way again. And I never thought I'd meet someone like you. I admitted, voice low, warm, steady. Someone who sees me, really sees me. She leaned into me again, pressing her forehead against mine. Then I guess we're both lucky. We sat like that for a while, just holding each other, letting the world outside fade away. No rush, no fear, just the steady rhythm of two hearts, fragile and human, finally aligned. The age gap, the hesitation, the risks, all felt smaller now, absorbed into the comfort of shared understanding and mutual surrender. Finally, she tilted her head back and smiled up at me, eyes bright, alive. So, what now? I grinned, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. Now, we take it one moment at a time. Together. She nodded, leaning back into my chest again, and I held her tighter. The warmth, the trust, the quiet joy between us, it was a beginning, not an end, but a promise, messy, human, and entirely ours. And in that simple embrace, everything else felt right. Speech balloon engagement for YouTube. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?